Hello, I'm Dr. Brenda Murphy, and I'm an educational psychologist with Sail Away Learning and Academy. This is a special series that we're having called Stranger in My Body. It's my personal story of my experience and my husband's experience with COVID-19. On July the 3rd, 2020, we began developing symptoms of COVID. And it took several days for us to really accept the fact that we had become infected with that dreaded virus. And because, Frank, quite honestly, both my husband and I, especially my husband, were among the people that it would be very dangerous for. I'm in great health, so not so much for me, but certainly for him. And so we began a journey that in several days, when we were 11 days into COVID, I started feeling really good and my husband started feeling good. And during this time, we were doing the things that people had advised us to do. Well, we were taking Tylenol or ibuprofen, drinking lots of water, liquids. We were sleeping as much as possible. And we were also taking lots of vitamin C and zinc. And we were also doing something I would encourage everyone to do, and that's to get a pulse ox or an oximeter, which is the little device that takes your functioning of how much lung capacity you have, how much oxygen your body is actually producing. And in a normal time, it would be 95 and above, or even 90 and above is a reasonable figure. However, with COVID, that is one number that's important to look for and to keep track of. And 11 days into our experience, we had lost our sense of smell. We had lost our sense of appetite. We no longer had much of an appetite, especially my husband. I still kind of had an appetite. I kind of will tell you a funny story. I mean, there are some humorous things that happen during this time of really not feeling well. I have a special dusting powder that I like. It has sort of a very fragrant rose aroma to it. And I had run out, and so I'd ordered some, and it came, and I opened it up, and I opened the container, and I smelled it, and I thought, oh, I hope this is not a bad batch because I can't smell anything. Honestly, I was not feeling well enough to do anything about it if that were the case. However, later I realized that that was just another symptom of COVID in my body. But 11 days in, on July the 14th, as I said in the part one of this series, I really started feeling well. Although my brain had left me, that stranger had come into my body uninvited, unexpected, unwanted, and was doing all sorts of things to my body that I really did not like, and especially wasn't allowing me to think. And that's one thing that I really enjoy doing. I'm a researcher. I like to discover things. So when that came, I also lost my ability to really think as clearly as I normally do. And that was very disconcerting to me. But on the 11th day, for some reason, all of a sudden I could think clearly, and I had that creative energy about me. And it was the old Brenda back, and that stranger was kind of pushed behind. And I told my husband, honey, I think we're on the way home. I think we're on the other side. I think we're getting well. And he said, oh, I feel that way too. And we were taking our oximeter readings, and mine stayed well in the 90s, upper 90s, and his kind of fluctuated on the lower end and sometimes even into the 80s and high 80s. And we walked. We had advice from one of our sons who's in the medical field, said, be sure and walk, drink plenty of liquids. And also my husband has a CPAP. And so we use a CPAP, and we kind of kept that oximeter reading up a little bit. However, after having a really good day, that night was really a nightmare. When I got ready to get into bed, all of a sudden, I felt like the whole world was spinning, and I was so dizzy that I ended up holding on to the bed, sitting up against the pillows in the bed, and not even wanting to turn the light off, because I felt if I turned that much to the right to where the light was, that I would fall off the bed. It was a miserable night. And I prayed very sincerely and deeply, Lord, save me, rescue me, heal me. And finally I fell asleep, hoping that maybe the next morning I would feel better. That was the 12th day since I had begun having symptoms. But on the 12th day, on that next day, on the 15th, I still didn't feel any better. I was kind of sluggish and draggy. And although I kept going, I did some Zoom meetings, probably shouldn't have done anything but sleep. I had my husband to take care of because there was no one else in the house. And he really wasn't feeling well. And it was more difficult for him to get up and walk to the bathroom. And he didn't want to walk anywhere else, although we had been walking. That was some advice, was keep up your physical activity as much as possible, and we had done that. But on the 15th, he really didn't feel well, and he started sleeping even more. And I was really tired, and I was sleeping more, and the ibuprofen and the Tylenol just wasn't doing it. My oximeter was still holding steady, and I called our doctors and prescribed some things. I went outside it was part of a very dry spell here, and I went outside to turn on the water faucets to water the grass. And when I came back, I noticed this heaviness in my chest, and it was hard to breathe, and it was harder for me to walk up the stairs than it ever had been before. And I prayed, Lord, help us. And so somehow, again, listened to scriptures on my iPhone and songs of healing and deliverance and of encouragement and peace and rest. I reached out to friends across the country, and they began praying for me and gave me some advice. And I have to admit that some of them had encouraged us to call. We were in touch with doctors, and I will say that my husband, through his VA, they had volunteered to have telehealth call us every day, and we were doing so well. They said, I think you're doing okay. And we said, we thought we were too. And lots of them were giving us very good advice, and it became apparent that maybe home care, taking care of ourselves at home, wasn't really working that well. And so on the 16th, my husband really struggled. He really could not get up from his chair. He has a reclining chair, so he was sleeping in the chair. And he was not wanting to eat at all, and I could barely get him to take his normal medications and to drink water. He was just lying there, and I noticed that his oximeter meetings were going low. And we wake up and say, I'm going to call and take you to the hospital. He'd say, no, because in our minds, what we thought about when we thought about going to the hospital for COVID was the scenes in the ICU of people on ventilators and of sirens blaring in the night and of not being able to recover and recuperate. And my husband actually said, if I'm going to die of this thing, and we trusted and believed that we were not going to die of this, but he said, if I'm going to die, I want to die at home. That was a pretty powerful statement that he made. And I thought to myself, I don't want my husband to die, and I know that I do not have the tools to help him. So the late evening on the 16th, I took his oximeter meter reading, and it had been lingering in the 80s, the upper 80s and middle 80s, and he was asleep, and I knew there was nothing I could do. And I called my personal care doctor, and she said, Brenda, hang up and call 911. It's funny, sometimes you don't always do what you know to do. And a friend in Kansas City called, and she said, Brenda, call 911. I hung up and I called 911. And it was a moment of relief for me, and I started crying. I cried out to the Lord, Lord, heal my husband and save him and protect him. And within just a couple of minutes, there was a knock on the door. I could hear the ambulances and the knock on the door. And I opened the door, It was like an angel walked in. Uh, a member of the church that I go to is a fireman and EMT with our local community. And he walked in and he said, "It's going to be okay, Brenda." And I believed him. And he went in and woke my husband up. He was really surprised. He didn't know what was happening. He says, "Who are you? What are you doing in my house?" And they said, "We are EMT and we've come to help you." And immediately they took out the oxygen and they put the oxygen on him. And immediately his oximeter reading went up into the 90s and he immediately felt better. And then another set of EMTs came and they were attending him for a little while, maybe for about 5 or 10 minutes. And they said, they took the oxygen off and immediately he started feeling bad again and was having trouble breathing again. And my husband, who has been an actor, was an actor and a broadcast journalist, has a way of performing and putting on an act. And I wish he hadn't been such a good actor, because during some of this time, he really was not feeling as well as he put on an act for. But that night, those numbers, he could not put on an act in the face of those numbers. And so at first, when they said, "I think we should go to the hospital," he says, "No, I'm fine now. I'm going to stay here." And they said, "This oxygen won't last more than about 10 minutes. And when it's gone, you're going to get worse. And then you really won't be able to breathe and we won't be able to help you." So he looked at me and I looked at him, and I knew in my heart, I had a peace knowing that things were going to be okay. But we looked at each other and the love that we've shared for many, many years. And I said, "Honey, this is what's best." And he said, "I think so too." And so they put him on the gurney going out. We rolled him out to the ambulance. And of course, some of the neighbors came and I said, "Please don't come close because we have COVID and my husband is going to the hospital because he's in really serious condition." And so I remember the dark of the night. It was about 10 o'clock at night, and seeing those red lights whirling in the night, flashing in my neighbor's face and her daughter's face, and those going off into the distance, and walking back into our house, and it was empty, and knowing that my husband was in the only hands in which he was safe, and those were in God's hands, and I trusted him in that. We will come back and share the next part of this story. And as these words blessed me during that time and have throughout our Strong at Home sessions and conversations together, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. I'll see you as I share the concluding part of my story of Stranger in My Body, my story of surviving COVID. Thank you.